Blonde and white.
Yep, right. That's what I was just checking. Once you're right.
Yep.
Good morning, members. Thank you very much for attending this morning. We'll read out the emergency procedures first of all. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit? There is one fire exit in this room. You will need to evacuate the room. Do so via the glass door and the external fire escape staircase. Please hold both handrails in case the stairs are wet or slippery. If anyone is unable to use the stairs, would they please allow others to exit the room before they go out to the fire escape door where they can be given assistance. Our assembly point will be in the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note this meeting will be audio recorded. Can I please remind members to switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent? Moving on to the agenda, I have got some comments that I would like to make before we get into the body of the agenda today, but we'll do items 1 to 4 before I make any further comment. So, have we got any apologies for absence? None. Non-members attending? None. Minutes of the... sorry. Yeah. Councillor Ward.
Yeah.
Minutes of the meeting held on 17th of November. Accept those as agreed. Yep. Thank you very much. And declarations of interest.
Portfolio for enterprise.
Okay. Thank you very much, George.
And if you want to note my one as well.
I think officers have asked me to read a statement in relation to joint strategic plan across South Essex, which I will, and if members want copies of it, we'll arrange for that to be distributed to you. No problem with that at all. The amount of paperwork that was forwarded to us was horrendous. It was totally... if you tried to read every page, I think you were going to be up to nearly 1,000 pages, which was, not acceptable. Hopefully, Natalie's subsequent email clarifying some of the information that is really supporting documentation in relation to other councils' policies relieved some of the concerns. But how I intend to go through this, if we can, is that as we address each item, and I'm sure we all read officers' comments on each agenda item, Natalie will give a précis on each item. You can then ask her questions. If there's anything that we need to clarify subsequently, then she will forward answers to you if they're not readily available. Okay? Right, the officers have asked me, and this is to read this out, this may clarify a few issues. As members will have noted, there have been documents published with reference to strategic planning and the delivery of a joint strategic plan across South Essex. The Council signed a Memorandum of Understanding with 5 other South Essex authorities, being Basildon, Brentwood, Castle Point, Southend and Thurrock, in January 2018. This being followed by a joint statement of common ground, which is to be considered at the meeting of the Rochford Full Council on the 17th of July 2018. Members will also note that the local development scheme sets out a proposed timetable for the preparation of a joint strategic plan for South Essex. Whilst this is not an agenda item for this meeting, as the statement of common ground is to be taken to the full council, I thought it might be useful to provide some brief context underpinning this work. When the council reviewed the statutory timetable for preparing its new local plan, it was envisaged that policy making would follow the traditional 3-staged approach to enable an aspirational but deliverable plan to be formulated. The review of the Council's current planning policies stated with an early engagement programme where the strategic planning team went out into the local communities to involve them in the consideration of the issues that the district faced and potential future opportunities. This programme was followed by the most recent consultation of an initial issues and options document earlier this year. However, the plan-making climate has changed considerably over the last 5 to 10 years with the removal of regional planning system, publication of the National Planning Policy Framework and the Planning Practice Guidance. Legislative changes, case law and more recently proposals to the amendment of the National Planning Policy Framework and the Planning Practice Guidance. Most significantly for plan making, the latter relates to how the need for new homes is calculated and ultimately met across the country. Subsequently, it has been recognised that there is a need to deal with a number of key strategic issues in partnership with our neighbours to ensure that they are effectively addressed and planned for. Such strategic issues fall within the remit of the duty to cooperate, which is the legal requirement that the Council would need to demonstrate to an independent planning inspector had been met. Joint planning across South Essex, however, is in its infancy and will evolve as it progresses. Should members have any questions, these will be noted today and written responses will be provided in due course. If you want a copy of this, I asked Natalie to produce something to give you a bit of guidance. We're quite happy to get this forwarded to you. If anybody wants it, I'll give that a nod. So if you can forward that to all members, please, Natalie. Right. I think briefly I've covered the points that I wanted to in regards to the quantity of volume of paperwork that we received. Having spoken to Natalie, I don't think there was much you could do to avoid it. It was what it was, and we've had to do it. The main criteria, as I understand from Natalie, is that the item Agenda 5 is the only one that we need to make a recommendation to full council for. Yeah, go on, John.
I shared your concern. I mean, thankfully mine appeared in a block. Thank you, Sonia, for that. It was helpful to me to have the paper copies. I couldn't have possibly viewed them on screen. My internet has disappeared. It may return. I wondered whether we could have had other meetings of this policy committee to receive these evidence documents earlier. And maybe if we had more meetings, we could have less documents than in a single meeting. I can certainly see, as the JSP and our part in it, and our local plan proceeds, that there will be far more documentation that's going to be critical. I can think of issues like highways.
Yeah.
I can think of other major infrastructural considerations, which, you know, although they're evidence, I think there's a need for members to have sufficient time to look at that evidence and determine whether the council's satisfied with the evidence base. I don't think it's simply a case of saying that's the evidence, that's it, it's on the table. If we're not satisfied that the evidence meets all of the criteria that we would see met, and certainly if there are questions, we may have to go back to consultants or others. And I think we're going to need to have more time to do that.
If I may, John, I think you've just said exactly, or virtually, the same conversation as I had with Natalie, and independently with June. I don't think, I share your view entirely, no problem with that at all, but I don't think the information was available, as far as I'm aware. When this lot came, this was the first time I knew about it, and as far as I'm aware,
It's the same for me.
same for Councillor Ward.
Can
So,
you come back on that, please, Chair?
well, let me just finish up. But I think we've registered quite clearly that we have concerns in line with what you've said, and I would be very disappointed if we have to go down this road again. Now, yeah, go.
My suggestion would be if all these turned up, like the veritable London bus, it used to be Southend buses, but of course it's been privatised, it doesn't happen anymore. But if it does happen again, I think we're going to have more than one meeting.
Fully agree.
To look at these issues. I don't mind spending a whole day here if that's what everyone desires, but I don't think that's desirable. I think people's focus needs to be dragged appropriately to a sharp point, rather than spread across 5 or 6 important documents.
Fully agree.
I would say if they turn up all in one, then we have a meeting a week. There's probably, as it's evident, no huge time pressures in actually having them put into the library. I would suggest we need to do more on them than just hope we've looked at them in sufficient detail. I'm going to say, Chairman, I haven't managed to look at these, I think, in sufficient detail. And I want that on record because they have turned up. I've endeavoured to read conclusions, introductions, summaries, but I think I should have done more. And I didn't have the time to do more, and I think that needs to be recorded.
Yeah. John, I can't disagree with you. I think it's a common view, and hopefully officers and the portfolio holder will take this back, and hopefully we won't go down this road again.
Can I just come into this? I did register very, very strongly my feelings with Natalie with regard to this. Some of these documents have come through originally, and I have seen them, so I can see as I've gone through. But I really do appreciate that to actually read and digest and understand, because in fairness, item 5, what is going forward on that, all the rest are the basis of the assessments, are the assumptions, and everything that is drawn from what is in those documents. And I think it is quite reasonable that members should also have the opportunity to make and draw their own conclusions from the evidence, so that they can make fair debate in regards to that, because that's going to be very, very important. We all have a different view on how things should be done, and I think we will need to have, come together on a view so that we can all go forward on a joint consensual way. So I feel that, yes, I think that you agree with me as well, because of leave and such like. She said these should all have gone out a lot earlier. Whatever happened, I don't know. It's going to be water under the bridge now, but I said this cannot happen again. This cannot happen again. This is totally unfair on members of this committee to be able to look and understand and digest what is a vast amount of information, to be able to make any conclusions with regard to what we're trying to do, because it all slots in, but you need time to digest and understand the information and facts that are presented to you.
I think so. Thank you. I think going forward, and we'll go through this with Natalie in a minute, I think going forward we need to put a timetable in place, even if it's short notice meeting. We will try and do it. If another document comes in or whatever we've got to do, let's not sit on it for, we have a quick phone round or whatever we need to do. But if we have to pick them off, as John has said, one a week or one a fortnight, then that's what we'll do, and we'll go through them, okay? Right, moving on then, having registered our concerns about all this, and I don't have any problems at all. I think we've all shared this view. Over to you, Natalie, for item number 5, to give your précis and let members ask any questions should they so desire.
Okay, so item 5 is the revised local development scheme to support local plan making. Members will note that we've had a number of iterations since we commenced the review of the Council's adopted planning policies in 2015. This latest update follows the most recent consultation on the local plan and provides an update to our expected timetable for each stage of consultation. It also includes a broad timetable for the joint strategic plan, which Councillor Sparing mentioned in his briefing note. There is some information in both the covering report and the appendix as well, which is the local development scheme itself, on the South Essex Joint Strategic Plan provides a bit more context on that, and as I mentioned, the broad time scales that we're looking to work to on developing that. So we're looking for a recommendation from this subcommittee to full council to adopt that broad timetable to support plan making. Because we are also considering the joint plan as well as our local plan, the timetable that we've got in this report and in the local development scheme does follow that, which have already gone to committees at other local authorities in South Essex. So we are one of many that is following that same governance process.
Can I just ask if it is basically what we are proposing here in line with what is being proposed at all the other councils?
It is, yes.
And so, and there's been no feedback from any of those yet that there is any issues that...
No, nothing that's been reported to us.
Okay. John?
Thank you, Chairman. I see from the plan for our plan that we're talking about preferred options, consultation, summer, autumn. A bit concerned about that because summer's not a great time to have a consultation of that nature. If autumn means just over the road for September, I don't think that's a great time either. As you probably know, that's when the schools go back and families are readjusting. Some families are just taking their holidays because they choose not to take it that time. I think it would be a very poor thing if this council gets another consultation at a traditional holiday time.
I think,
I don't think making it longer, by experience, helps.
No.
I don't think starting in the middle of December and finishing in the middle of March actually helped anything at all. I think it was about the timing of the launch. I think it's about making sure that we choose a time which is going to be appropriate for our residents to be able to respond to a preferred options which, if the direction of travel in a cellar is towards garden villages or towns actually, given the responses from the inspector on the North Essex consultation, it seems that that is going to be a lot longer than was originally thought. I'm not sure that the JSP will deliver in the spring as it suggests. I think it will be much later. You might say in that case that's not a problem because our plan will be kiboshed. But on the other hand, we should be planning for our residents and not just simply, hoping for something else to happen. A bit Brexit style, really. Brexit style is hoping something will happen, and we would be doing the same. I think we need to knock this out until October for a preferred options consultation, and that might in fact actually help cater for a fallback position if the spring is not delivered by a seller anyway.
Well,
So I won't be supporting the recommendation, and that's a decision of our group.
okay. Have you got any comments on that, Nasty? Because October seems a reasonable time to me, or have you got any other dates in?
No, I mean we tried to work out our revised timetable to fit in with the Joint Strategic Plan. We don't want there to be any real overlap with, in terms of consultation. We don't want people to get confused with if there were two consultations happening at the same time at different scales. So I'm happy to maybe push it back to autumn, winter, if that's helpful. Just to give us that, rather than committing us to a specific month, to have that flexibility still. There are other issues to consider with, in terms of evidence being available at the time that we need to publish a plan, as well as taking into consideration the capacity of the team to deliver within a certain time scale. So I would prefer if it was still a bit broad. We can revise the local development scheme nearer the time if it's helpful to pinpoint the consultation periods. We have the flexibility to do that. We are required to keep it up to date. So if there are any delays, for example, in the joint strategic plan coming forward next spring, we do have the option of updating the local development scheme to reflect a revised timetable for that plan, as well as our local plan if we feel that it's not going to be hitting the targets that we're currently aiming for.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a helpful response. I'm grateful to hear that. I was concerned that we may stick to that and not even consider anything else. I think there's a problem with calling things autumn, winter, because I'd be a bit concerned that, you know, we might enter December again. I think we've got to be rather more specific and ensure that, you know, we do complete this preferred options consultation. If that fits with what's happened before and makes it doable, then I think we've got to complete it by the end of November, in which case that goes back the other way and says you need to start it by a certain date.
I think, John, you've highlighted an issue. I think the best thing we can do is we've highlighted it to officers to come back with a proposal to us. If we're going to have, and I think we need to put this in plan anyway, more regular meetings of this committee, even if we have one next month or whatever, come back to us then with your reviewed, revised, whatever phrase you want to use, of what the plan is, and we'll consider it then. I mean, we're not going to be negative, but we want, and we appreciate the timetable that you have to work to. But I also think that we need to make sure that we're on board and we know what's going on, because we don't want to find ourselves a bit like all this lot being pushed into a corner where we've got no time to say, well, actually, no, we don't want to do this, or we don't think it's right. And if you're quite happy to go with that, we'll have a regular meeting, even if it's just to say, right, this is the latest update. We have one in, you know, later this month or at the latest beginning of August. This is where we've moved on to, even if it's a 10-minute meeting. Go on. And then Neil.
If I just come in on this, having attended all the ASAILA meetings there, I've got a very good feeling in regards to representatives from other districts and boroughs. And although they're very, very keen, everybody wants to work together towards an end. And of course the end has always been the concept that we cannot get infrastructure on our own. The only way we're going to get infrastructure is with this joint strategic plan. That's the only way that we're going to be big enough to be able to make a representation to government to get that. But I kind of do understand what you're coming at as far as this is, John, in as much as that, you know, we need a wee bit more flexibility in being able to understand. We want to get a definitive end of our consultation that we've got, but we also need to work back to when that should start. And I can probably understand as well, maybe October, November, if we're looking at 19 and 20 for both of those times, especially where I do recognise that a lot of consultative documents are coming to us extremely last minute, which is very, very annoying. Believe you me, it really is annoying. And we need time to be able to filter those in so that we're taking everybody together on this, so, you know, everybody is content and happy. And that to me is important, as it is to every other district and borough that, you know, that we've been talking with, that they have those same concerns with members, making sure that they fully understand all the evidence that is coming forward, everything that's going in there. So I have no problem with making something a wee bit more positive about this, rather than being airy-fairy into a time. So we've actually got hang on, we need to have this definitively, let's say for November. That gives us breathing space in there. We can actually start to have the evidence, the documents, we can start to have a proper consultation where people feel they have a lot of involvement in this and we get the feedback. Of course, maybe there are going to be people who are not going to be happy with what goes on, but ultimately we have to come to a decision which is going to be for the benefit of everything. And I kind of do concur with your feelings on that one.
That's time for budget. Sorry, I'm just trying to... Go on, Neil.
I was just wondering if we've got a preferred sort of period, whether it's that month as a starting point for a consultation. Is it possible, on the basis that it would seem that we would be having quite regular meetings, that Natalie can sort of like come and say, well, at this point in time I'm 80% certain that we're going to meet that target, and in the following meeting, if there's suddenly something happens, well, I'm 60% certain we're going to meet that target.
I think this is what we've already highlighted.
Yeah.
We've already highlighted this.
Say, well, what is the problem? How can we resolve it? Is it something?
I don't think some of these, Neil, is going to be within our scope to resolve them. I think it's going to be outside factors that may have other issues in bring this into play. With regard to the recommendation, I've just been speaking to Natalie, and I accept John's comments. This is due to go to full council next week after, with the recommendation from us. Now, what we've just been trying to knock together here is that it is proposed that the subcommittee recommends to council Appendix A be adopted, and we've just put here, and I'm quite happy to talk about this, subject to October-November 2019 being the target date, but this will be kept under constant review and may need to be may need to be amended as time proceeds, which I think would give a recommendation to full council. Potentially we agree with it, but it may need to be adopted or altered if we feel that that's the case, and then we will go back to full council. June.
Thank you. I agree with what you're saying. There's an emphasis in here about the resource overall, and is that realistic? Is that what can be delivered? There's concern for our resource, there's concern even up to inspectorate level, all the way through, from what I just skim reading in the time before. Is it deliverable? What are the issues for us? Do we need a recommendation there about improved resource?
Okay, we are in the process of hopefully increasing the capacity of the team. So Dan has recently been made up to senior planner, and we're hoping that we will be able to go out to advert for a planner to support us through both the local plan process and the joint planning work as well. So we are looking to increase the capacity of the team overall. With regard to the resource issue for us on the joint plan making side, that is still in its infancy, that work. The governance arrangements are still being formulated, and it's likely there will be an element of resource required from each authority, but at this stage we're not quite sure how that's going to be proportioned. We can take any concerns that you have with regard to resourcing back to Sean and Matthew for them to consider and to review. That's certainly not a problem. I think we're quite confident that we can deliver something of our preferred options next year by October, November time. But the important thing is that we do keep our local development scheme under review. As you may have noted, we have 3 authorities in South Essex who have been identified by the government, and they have received intervention letters. So we've got Brentwood and Basildon who are being closely monitored by the government at the moment because they haven't had a local plan in place for quite a number of years now. They are being held to their timetable, and the government is closely monitoring that and requires adequate justification for any changes to that timetable as to why they're not going to meet their previous targets. Castle Point is in a slightly different situation in that the government has also highlighted them, but they are considering whether the Secretary of State will ask the County Council, for example, to intervene in that process. So there is a lot of pressure on local authorities to deliver a plan. We do obviously have an adopted plan, but the longer it takes for us to produce a plan, the more out of date that gets, and the government is quite clear that to have an out of date plan is not acceptable anymore. You need to be proactive in your planning. So although we do have a current suite of policies and we have been progressing our review, the government is taking a keen interest in everybody, and they are looking at our timetables on a regular basis to check how we are progressing now and whether we are being proactive enough to deliver a new plan.
Okay. Yes, Neil.
In relation to timetable and timescales, when this process was initiated, are we on time with the original deadlines that were set, or are we slipping?
There has been some slippage. We have had changes within the team. We lost a member of staff last year, and it has been difficult to recruit. There are challenges within the planning field in general in terms of being able to attract permanent members of staff. So there has been some slippage. There's also been issues with evidence in some cases and being able to get that turned around in a timely manner. So there are a number of different factors that can lead to a slippage in the timetable, and that unfortunately has been the case for us at Rochford. For example, we haven't been able to finalise our report following the most recent consultation. We have to prioritise our resources where we can. For example, in the run-up to this committee, we obviously have to do a lot of prep work in the background to deliver the reports to yourselves in as timely a manner as possible. But we are hoping to have another committee fairly shortly, where members can look in detail at some of the issues that have been raised and what our responses are.
Okay. I think we pretty much.
Can I just follow up on
Go on then.
The joint planning aspects with the other authorities, is that adding an additional layer of complication and to what we've done in the past? Potentially, I can see that there's benefits to it, but as far as you're concerned and the work that you have to do, is that causing?
It's not going to cause. It's an issue that's got to be dealt with. We don't have a choice of whether we cooperate with other councils. That's a fact of life now. We are obliged to do it. If we don't, then we'll end up like Castle Point did, in trouble with the inspectorate in December 2016.
Yeah.
When they didn't cooperate with their fellow councils. So
this connects with what June said in relation to
yeah. Oh no. I think we've highlighted our concerns that we need to have more meetings. I think we've highlighted concerns for the resources. I think we've highlighted. John's mentioned a more specific date for the preferred options declaration, October, November. But somewhere along the line, we've got to keep this under review. It may be, even if we have a more regular meeting, we cannot change the situation because of outside factors. But we will do what we can to make sure that we are as on the ball as we can, and we're as supportive of officers as we can be. But we can't predict the future. We're all here to do the best we can for our residents. But we have certain legislative requirements that we're obliged to meet, and we will do it. Now, if we as a committee have highlighted issues, and we can't, there's only so much we can do as a subcommittee, full council hopefully will take notice and hopefully make necessary remedial actions to address our concerns. But that will be for another 30 odd councillors to make that view. Go
Yeah,
on,
if I could just sort of add to this, I mean, one of the things that has been discussed, this is generally over with the sailor, is that every council must proceed with their own local plans. That was very, very important. The whole concept was eventually we will be working in sync with the joint strategic plans, but at this moment everybody has to proceed with their local plan, and the strategic plan is also carrying on above it, where we're going to try and harmonise together. But a very important point that when I was speaking to Natalie some time back with the reports that were coming through, and she said, well, in the main, the reports that we've got are pretty well complete. The problem is we're still waiting for evidential documents to come into them. So, you know, a lot of the problems has been receiving evidence to actually complete reports that go forward. So, you know, it's not as if, you know, they haven't been working really, really hard to complete the documentation. It's the simple fact that a lot of evidence is coming through quite late on. So, you know, but I see the documents incomplete with just X's which have got to be filled in, and that they just haven't got the actual facts to put in them yet. So, I mean, they're working very hard to get this stuff out, but we are subject to other authorities and other consultees who are sending stuff to us.
Can I just, I mean, I think we've thrashed this one around quite long enough, to be honest, unless anybody's got anything else. But I mean, we have a recommendation. I think we can adapt that to try and meet perhaps your concerns, John. I think we've highlighted a number of issues that are causing us concerns as a subcommittee, and I would suggest that, subject to your views, that we will go along with the recommendation, but we will draft some amendments to the recommendation which will highlight our concerns, and we will work on that now to come up with some wording that is all of us can sign up to or agree to, if there is such a sign. June.
Just a comment, just to say, Natalie, I think I may have misheard you, but going on what Ian was just saying about waiting for evidence elsewhere and the resource issue, around the comments that came back from the consultation, I think you said there been other things had to happen, therefore this document was not going to be available as soon as it may have been.
Yes.
When are we going to see that? Is that going to be at a meeting soon?
Where are we with that, please?
Well, it's probably about 70% complete, but it got to about 70% complete, and then other things have taken over. So it's really as and when I can
So do
look
you
at the
need
last.
something from us that?
So when is a realistic?
I think we were aiming for a September meeting
Okay.
to bring that to the subcommittee.
We put that into our
Yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah. But let's try and work out what we're going to say. I mean, we have a recommendation that the draft attached to Appendix A be adopted, subject to October, November 2019 being the preferred options.
Regulation 18. Yeah.
But we will keep this under constant review and may need to amend as the time progresses. I mean, I'm open. I share your concerns on all this, but we need to say something, some recommendation to council that, you know,
That we can all support.
that we can all support, but is reflecting our concerns.
I think we need to make sure, Chairman, that in the report of the minutes of this meeting are available for full council. I know that is going to be difficult, but it's important, because if we're making a recommendation which basically takes hold of the plan and says, well, actually, we're not supporting that, it's a subject to here, there's got to be reasons.
Yeah.
And if we don't, then there will be hordes of members standing up in full council saying, but you've still got the plan saying summer, autumn. You've got the subject too, but have you recognised the issues of a consultation around holidays? You see, I know that sounds obvious, but the most obvious is the things that members are concerned about. In other words, the reason for this recommendation, which is an adjunct subject to, is because we recognise these concerns.
So what do we say?
Well, I'm just asking, will the minutes of this committee be available for full council? Essentially, Chairman, I'm asking Sonia. But I felt I should ask you.
Yeah, no. Okay.
There will be a report from this subcommittee going into full council on Tuesday.
The minutes of it?
Report.
A report.
It'll be a
Which will
report.
essentially include the major issues that
Exactly.
cause this chapter. Thank you.
Okay. George?
I'm still concerned that Dan's going to deliver by September.
No, well, what we're going to do, George, we're going to have another meeting in August,
Right.
and Dan's going to tell us in August if he's
An
going
It's up to 85%.
He's up to 85%, by which time we will be talking to Councillor Ward, Matthew and everybody else saying, where are we going? Because we can't keep putting all this stuff back,
Yeah, okay.
you know?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay?
I mean, with prioritisation, it
Yeah,
can
of course,
definitely be
Dan, we're not criticising, we're trying to work out
Trying to help.
support
Yeah.
because if this committee keeps expressing concern, and we've been on other committees where Councillor Mason and myself expressed concern many years ago, and results came out of it. But somebody's got to highlight them,
It is a resource issue.
okay?
That's what the point I was
Yeah.
trying to make.
So, how are we going to do with this recommendation? Are we going to say it and then say subject to, or?
I don't, to be perfectly honest, Chairman, I don't like subject to, because that is an adjunct. In other words, you're keeping the plan as it is, and you're saying, well, it may say that, but actually we mean that, we mean this. I suppose what you're saying is that it's got to be made. The words have got to indicate that the plan has been changed to that effect.
That we have. What I'm trying to do is give a recommendation to council, expressing, appreciating what we've got to do and what we've got to recommend, but how.
The recommendation could be that full council changes that from what it says at the moment to what we are recommending.
So we are recommending that the plan is changed to take into
Yeah.
account what we know.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's positive
Yeah. Okay.
and clear.
Do you want to make a note of this, Sonia? Councillor Lumley will give forth. Our fifth.
I'm very glad you've taken over.
Nice timing, Jude.
I'm not sure how you spell blah blah, but
Yeah.
Dash.
Recommendation. Yeah.
essentially what we're saying is we're not happy with it because.
Yeah.
Yes. And that will incorporate the recommendation that we are expecting to see the feedback from the issues and options in September. Otherwise, you're
Hopefully.
going to have members standing
Yeah.
up, I can assure you.
Hopefully.
And I may be one, saying, I'm sorry, but...
The plan is
we need-
September.
We need to know.
Yeah, the intention is September, but we will have a meeting, but we will be kept advised before that if that isn't going to happen.
As far as council's concerned,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it just basically means the subcommittee's done its work.
Yeah.
It doesn't need other members to step into its shoes.
Have you got, what have you got then,
Now,
Sonia?
can I'm not entirely clear here. Are you wanting to recommend that the plan is amended?
Yes.
Yeah.
And specifically, what do you want amended in the plan? Because I
The
think we
issues
need to
and
put that.
options, the preferred options consultation takes place between October
October, November. 2019.
2019, full stop. And that, with regard to the feedback on the issues and options consultation, that this is planned for
September
September, but we'll keep it under
2018.
close review.
And we also,
it's a resource,
yeah,
it's a resource issue, isn't
Yeah.
So,
And
feedback on the issues and options document is September 2018.
Chairman, if I just
Yeah.
come in, if we go to 3.7, which then will help us to understand what is being said, for Regulation 18,
3.7 where?
in the main document. In the main document, yeah. The main draft. Yeah.
That one? Yeah.
Yeah, yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, John.
Yeah.
So in regard to that, for Regulation 18, we are recommending that it be put back to October, November as a definitive.
Yes.
And then we're looking at Regulation 19 for the same, because it would have to follow that same framework. We'd be completely out of sync if we left it
Okay.
in that way. So we need to put that in. I believe we can safely leave Regulation 22 as it is for winter 2020, because again we're coming into that later period.
There won't be, sorry, Councillor, there won't be any consultation at that period. It will just be for us to
Okay.
pull everything
prepare,
together and
yeah.
submit it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then it's up to the planning inspectorate from that point
Correct.
onwards, so.
That's it. Yeah. But are members happy that be the item that goes through, and do members feel that they can support that going to council?
Yes, I
We can now.
Okay.
We'll change it later.
Okay. Right. I think we've finally achieved. Yes, Neil.
Probably a matter for Sonia and how this will present. So we sort of like state this was the officer recommendation first, and then this is the subcommittee's
Following.
amended.
This report will be appended to the subcommittee. Yeah, so you've got that reference point.
So people can see the line.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We all happy?
What about the resource issue?
Well, I think that will be highlighted. Do we need to put that in the amendment? Or I think we could.
That will be in the report of the subcommittee.
It's in the report.
Yeah.
Okay.
The amendment.
No, it's nothing to do with the amendment. No, the resource issue is a separate issue that needs addressing,
Yes.
because the resource
Budget,
issue,
the budget requirement.
yeah, the resource issue is affecting, or is separate from the amendments that we're talking about.
But it isn't.
It's a contributory factor to why we're having to do this.
We
Yeah.
need to get a report back to whatever meeting of this subcommittee we
Committee.
choose. So in other words, this is an issue we've seen.
Yeah.
We'd like a report back by
Can we leave that?
the head of
Yeah.
blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Yeah, we'll take that.
Can you say that as portfolio holder?
Yeah.
I really love it.
Well, I think we need to have a meeting in August, and hopefully, as portfolio holder, Ian, you will come back with
It's looking at resources and where resources are going to be.
We want an update in August of where we've moved on to, how we think we're going to address these issues to ensure that we can get our,
Regulation 18s and 19s
in
on
place.
time and
and
going
also
through.
the
Yeah.
options that should be out in September 2018 are on time.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
5. On to item number 6, Natalie, which is the economic growth strategy.
So the economic growth strategy was presented to a meeting of the executive in December last year. That focuses primarily on the economic development element of my team, which is under Councillor Iana's portfolio. That document sets out 4 key priorities to support economic growth over the next few years in the district. At that meeting of the executive, officers said that they would also deliver a clear implementation plan which would set out the key actions that officers would look to undertake over the next financial year to deliver against those 4 priorities. This is also supported by 10 key performance indicators so that we can more closely monitor the economic development function now that we've got a new regeneration officer post in place. The implementation plan is quite detailed and quite specific, and does also make some budgetary commitments, but that's specifically from the economic development budget rather than the policy budgets. But the implementation plan itself is actually going to the executive, which is now on the 12th of July, I believe, to be considered for approval.
John?
Chairman, I probably missed this, so it's a naive question. On the very first page of Appendix 6, there's tabled introduction and key performance indicators. Every single one, 1 to 10, says the number of, and yet there's no target. I just wonder why there aren't any numbers alongside it, because otherwise it's pointless.
It's very, it's quite challenging sometimes to put a target against it because it's very dependent on other factors. For example, the number of planning applications that come in. It depends on the number that are relevant to the function itself. The same with things like development briefs. Funding grants, it depends on what funding grants are available and what businesses actually want to take up those opportunities. We've been out to lots of different businesses in the past about various grants, but just some businesses just don't have the time or aren't particularly interested in actually pursuing specific.
Chairman, this doesn't do it for me. It's a KPI, it needs a number. It's going to have to be redrafted to make, to effectively say that it's going to be whatever the number is. It's pointless having a KPI without a target.
Is that possible? From what you've just said, that isn't an option. You can't get, it's just going to be a guesstimate. You can put any number in you like.
Yeah, we can put targets in there, but what do you do if you can't meet them?
Explain why.
But there's lots of different
Quite simply explain why, which is what KPIs are all about.
Yeah, all right, John.
I've spent 30 years doing this sort of stuff.
But calm down, John.
You put in a number, yeah, but it's pointless, isn't it? I mean, I've been asked to read this huge wad of stuff, and the first thing I came to was a bunch of KPIs with no numbers. Now, I've asked the question. I think you rightly said, excuse me, but we should put a set of numbers in. And it's a guesstimate, it's an estimate, they always are. And then the question then becomes, well, what do you do if you don't meet them? And I just said, explain, which is what it's all about.
But and I'm playing devil's advocate here, if there is no evidence to support the number that you put in it really is a guesstimate, what are you achieving? I mean, Natalie can put in all sorts of numbers here.
And delete them, because they're a waste of time.
Well, I don't. That's not an option.
At the moment, we don't have any numbers to monitor against. So this will be our first year that we'll be monitoring these KPIs, if you like. In the next iteration, next year, we can use this year as our base. At the moment, we don't have anything.
Meaningless, Chairman. I'd like it minuted. My experience tells me if it's in commerce, if it's a KPI and a number is put to it, even though it may be difficult, and if that number is not met or wildly exceeded, explanations are provided. To have none is pointless.
But if the explanation is, well, we had no evidence and it was just a guesstimate in the first place, what are we actually achieving?
In which case, Chairman, I'd say delete them then. There is no point in calling something a KPI. If you're saying calling it a key performance indicator, there is no point in having it if there's no target for it at all.
Do you want to come in, George? Because it's your area.
Yeah, I do, and I've worked with KPIs myself, and starting from a blank sheet, you have to have some type of feedback from your stats, and now at the moment we haven't got those stats available, but through our own personal experience, we could, to John's point, have a, I wouldn't call it a guesstimate, but an educated guess of what the KPI value could be with a plus or minus return on the KPI value, which allows the officers to actually comment on whether the KPI was met or not. At the moment, that's the approach I would take and leave the 10 based off the educated guess with a plus or minus value, and then use that as a base in the forthcoming future to actually assess where we stand from the previous year. Now, I think I can sit down with Natalie after this and we can go through the 10, because I've got to present this at executive, but in my view, that's what I was going to say, executive, that a value will actually be...
You're right there? Yeah?
Yeah, if I may, I can see where the issue is. If we're starting from scratch on something, it has to have a basis of what the scratch is. And if we're going to appoint a score, a number, then okay, it may be wrong, it doesn't matter. I think you've got to have an assumption of what a number should be, an ideal assumption. And I can absolutely understand where John's coming from, because you've got to have something to start with. You may be wrong, doesn't matter. The simple fact is you're not at fault if you're wrong. All you're now looking at is, okay, you made assumptions. Now you can actually work on facts as you progress through the year, and you're going to have a proper figure, so you'll actually know where you're going to come to.
Exactly.
So I think that, okay, if that, to me, makes perfect sense. If we're going to put it out as a KPI, then we start off with our assumptions. It doesn't matter if they're right, wrong. We're not going to get shot on this one. The simple fact is, we've got a basis of where an educated guess is going to be right or wrong. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the year, of the period that we're measuring it, we'll be able to understand more of how our assumptions are working, and are we meeting them, exceeding them, or whatever.
Or do we just need to amend this in light of what you've said, George, to take to the executive?
Yes.
It's not going
There's
to...
no penalties attached to not meeting targets.
I do...
Or are there?
sorry.
No, it's a question.
There aren't any penalties, but we have a temporary regeneration officer post in our team, and we would be looking at the KPIs and the work that part of the team is undertaking to try and justify a business case for making that a permanent post.
If you don't have any targets, you can't get them.
You can have targets if they're educated assumptions, and if you place your assumption against each of the KPIs, you can use that as a base for your first year.
If you do what we're saying you should do, yes, this before us, isn't it?
Oh,
Implicated in that, isn't this is saying there aren't any targets? So my point is how do you want
yeah,
So I agree with you.
yeah.
So I'm just saying, how are you going to make that judgment? In the form that you presented this to us, what you just now explained, is to give you that judgment.
Yeah, it's the same, isn't it?
Yeah. Can we just say, we're trying to work out what is being recommended to the executive here, and that we saying here that subject to the comments by the executive, the implementation of plan of economic growth, and we would have to put an amendment in there saying that we believe that there should be
Numerical targets.
indicating the key performance indicators.
Numerical targets, but also assumptions relating to those numerical targets. Because
Okay.
without the targets, without the assumptions, how can you actually get your
Well, you'll be taking this to the executive, George.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
But I'll speak to Natalie afterwards.
Okay. We agree with that? Happy with that?
Are you happy with that, John?
Yeah, I sat back and listened. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Pleased to hear that the subcommittee is going to be recommending and seeing that targets are put in place,
Yeah.
with all the caveats we've
Yeah.
spoken about. Of course, it will be able to. It's called economic growth, so growth implies improvement. If we see against a particular parameter that KPI that it's not being achieved, or it's been achieved at a level we don't think is satisfactory, then we up it. We'll lower it, whatever is appropriate. But that's the way we're going to assess the term growth.
Yeah.
which is what
Well-
started me off.
Yeah.
Well, we've put in, I think, what you've asked for, John.
Yeah.
George, you've heard the concerns. You're the portfolio holder. You'll be presenting it to
I'll be
executive.
presenting the executive and asking for an amendment
Okay.
to the actual document.
Can we then agree with the recommendation? Can we? The South Essex Economic Development Needs Assessment attached to Appendix A be noted as evidence and published to the Council's website, and that the issues regarding to the executive be amended as you've got noted, Sonia. Okay. Right, moving on, Natalie, item number 8. Here we go.
7?
Oh, 7, sorry.
So item 7 is the South Essex Economic Development Needs Assessment.
Yeah.
As members will note, we prepared a topic paper specifically on the Rochford elements that were coming out of the Emerging South Essex study, which was presented to the subcommittee in November last year. This was because, as Councillor Ward has already alluded to, certain elements of the studies were complete ahead of others. But we were able to pick out the Rochford elements to support the publication of our issues and options document. The report in front of you is that complete study, so it puts the Rochford element within the wider context of South Essex. I should point out that this South Essex study was commissioned before Brentwood became part of the South Essex area in terms of joint plan making, so it doesn't include anything to do with Brentwood. So it just focuses on the 5 South Essex authorities of Basildon, Castle Point, Rochford, Southend and Thurrock. The report before you does set out the main South Essex findings. There are issues for the sub-region. We need to take into account the effects of London, where businesses are being squeezed out of London due to high prices and the pressure for residential development. We've got the wide range of commercial transport hubs, infrastructure and business activity across the sub-region, including London Gateway, Port Tilbury in Thurrock, and also London Southend Airport. The economic climate across South Essex is expected to change over the next 15 to 20 years, and there are various economic challenges which will impact on all authorities across South Essex, and the report provides a brief outline of what those likely challenges are going to be, and it broadly sets out using a forecasting model based approach of how each local authority is likely to perform over the next 15 to 20 years in terms of the different types of businesses and industries that are actually locating within each area. It does this primarily through a combined scenario approach, looking at the specific challenges and opportunities for each local authority area. And the table on page 7.4 of that report gives you a broad outline of the supply, demand for each local authority in South Essex and for South Essex as a whole. For Rochford, this hasn't changed. There's still a likely demand for between 7 and 16 hectares over the next 15 to 20 years.
I'll just come in on that. I'm going to be making an assumption that Brentwood will have to be included in this at some time. So, albeit that we have what we have in front of us, again, we have a situation with Brentwood having now been part of a sailor. We're going to have to take what evidence we've got from them, and that's going to be incorporated. So again, we've got a situation that we're taking into consideration, a document here, which will be subject to change.
Any questions on what's been presented so far? Go on, Joe.
I know this is obvious, but the most obvious change is to be whatever is agreed out of Brexit, because we're talking about economic development here. And, you know, I have no doubt at all that whatever agreement is made, this will need to be looked at again. It may have beneficial impacts, it may have neutral impacts, or it may have extremely negative impacts. And I suppose one would like to know that the South Essex Consortium is going to consider that.
I think all we can do at the moment is to endorse the recommendation, but if we're going to have more regular meetings, this can just be a straightforward agenda item every time. And even if there's nothing more to report, or there is something to report, so be it, and we'll go from there.
Well, I guess it was a question to the consortium. I know Ian was nodding, but it would be good to hear from the consortium that, you know, they do recognise those issues and have plans and budget to revisit this.
I think you,
Otherwise, it's evidence that it's failed, isn't it?
I'm afraid. I mean, we've got evidence, which is actually evidence which would be probably the end of last year. In fairness, last year. So evidence, you know, is not particularly up to date. It never can be, because by the time you researched it, it's out of date anyway. You've only got a snapshot of what it was at a certain time, and that's what happens, and that's all we can work on realistically. But I think obviously it's going to make changes. I'm more of an optimistic disposition with regard to things. Having heard from the various boroughs and districts on what they are thinking with regard to their own areas, there is quite substantial optimism actually coming through from those members I've spoken with. So I feel very positive about things, I must admit, but again, it is a moving feast continually, and we're going to keep it under review. I think you've made the point. I think we all recognise this throughout that group, right the way through South Essex. So, you know, we're going to keep this under observation all the time.
So, can we agree to the recommendation? But again, perhaps we need
recognising the need for a reinforcement in the event of an agreement being made with Europe.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
I did say in the event of. I'm not totally convinced there'll be.
But I think this is another area, Ian. We accept the recommendation.
Yes.
But if this can just be a routine agenda item along with all the other stuff, and if you just say there is nothing further to report this month, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you update us as we go along.
Yeah.
Moving on then to local plan evidence-based South Essex retail study, item number 8.
Thank you. So, similar to previous study we've just discussed, this is again a joint study across South Essex. It doesn't include Brentwood due to the timings, and it specifically focuses on retail and leisure elements. So again, members would have received a topic paper in November last year prior to the issues and options consultation, setting out the Rochford District element of that study as it was emerging, to enable us to progress in a timely manner with our plan making. The retail study looks across South Essex and identifies the main hierarchy of different centres and how they function in relation to each other, where the draws are. So we have Lakeside, Basildon and Southend, which are the key shopping general retail draws for consumers across South Essex. We also have to be mindful of centres outside the area, including Chelmsford, where there is also a significant amount of leakage. So Rochford as a district sits within this wider context. Again, it's taken a forecasting model approach. The approach that's been preferred is a housing-led one, so it ties in quite nicely with the findings of the 2017 SHMA, which were emerging around about the same time that this piece of work was being worked on. So it seeks to align, similarly with the Economic Development Needs Assessment, it seeks to align population projections with economic in the previous study and with retail and shopping patterns in this study. If you look at these main findings for South Essex, as I've mentioned, it looks at the composition of centres right across South Essex. The three largest settlements in Rochford district, so Rayleigh, Hockley and Rochford, are identified as town centres due to their the way that they function and serve the local communities. It doesn't really touch on anything smaller than those areas, noting that the villages serve a much smaller catchment than the larger towns in the district. Goes through into quite a lot of detail about expenditure and leakage within and out of different areas. Rochford has its own niche as a district in certain regards. And there are various recommendations within that study as well as to how each local authority seeks to retain and increase its market share where it can.
I mean, this is a highly contentious one. I think it's changing by the week. For example, Rayleigh is benefiting now because there's no banks in Rochford or Hockley. So if you want to talk to anybody about building societies, banks or whatever, you come to Rayleigh. Online, the whole shooting match, they're predicting 20,000 job losses in retail this year. This, to my mind, is the report, and by the time we have another update, the latest report will come out nationally, and I think it'll be even more depressing, to be honest. Neil first, and then John. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I can't if there's anything that I could disagree with what the Chairman's just stated. I think this assessment is probably one of the hardest assessments to produce in relation to looking into the future in an industry which is really changing, as the Chairman said, almost on a weekly, if not monthly basis, to do with how major retail chains are looking into the future and changing their plans, in particular to floor space, which is going to have a big impact on our retail centres. Some are really going to have to specialise, or they may well sort of like die off gradually, as it is happening in other town centres around the country. It's important to have a flexible and open-minded strategy going forward with this, because we may end up losing out quite substantially in a very short period of time, and that affects how we look at our whole plan with regard to the evidence base for that plan as well, in relation to economic growth and demand for housing, etc.
Yeah. John.
Just one comment. I looked at page 5, which wasn't as far as I got, by the way. Not far beyond there. I certainly didn't get into the numbers. It's under paragraph 217, it talks about an assessment of the retail needs only to 231. But of course we're considering a plan to 237. And I'll call it the consortium because I just like the term. It's considering to 2050. So, this is just a snapshot, and for our presentation to the inspectors, we're going to have to go further than 231. Yeah. Otherwise, our coherent plan won't be.
Absolutely. I would agree with that, and as has been discussed recently, things are changing so quickly in that sector at the moment that we would need to do an up-to-date study at the right point in time for us to make sure that what we're planning for is correct. The face of high streets is certainly changing. They still have a role to play, but it's what that role is in each area that we need to be. Please
There'd probably
remind
just be collection points for online sales,
potentially.
instead of using them.
Yeah, I think, John,
No, it's not.
I mean, I could make a good case where Reigate High Street, there's no point in having anything past Love Lane and Castle Road. There've been restaurants, there is no requirement. And so I think we have to note this, again, keep us posted on the update, but I think, as I say, when you see these big stores just making corporate decisions, we're going to close 20 of our 50 stores, what chance have we got?
Well, what's interesting about that is, of course, we increase our population and we do it by housing.
Yeah.
Then they've got to be sustainable. And if the retail isn't sustainable for the numbers that we're talking about, then that's a major
It's
problem.
a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? Something
Yeah,
got right.
But that's why it's so critical.
Yeah.
If I can just come in with regard to discussions that we've had, and this is at that same high level, is fundamentally understanding that we want to be future-proofed where we can. So we're going to have to do a bit of crystal ball viewing. We can see how things are moving, where it's so important to be, have really good quality broadband, and I think that's one of the first things that we looked at with regard to infrastructure, the great changes that are occurring, and they are happening at a pace, and it's very difficult to keep up with that pace, because there are so many things that are being invented, created as we go along. We've just got to be so open-minded and flexible to change, and I think that's going to be one of the important key things with regard to this.
Councillor Ward Ian has highlighted something which is obviously close to my heart, because broadband is, as Ian says, absolutely essential for personal and business living,
Totally.
and there's no question about that, except to say that I can honestly tell you that the new infrastructure at Clements Gate hasn't been properly delivered, notwithstanding the fact that it was a requirement. It hasn't. You probably guess I've had quite a few conversations with Openreach. Openreach are quite clear that there are large areas in our district that are working off infrastructure that's 30 or 40 years old, and they're patching every day. To be honest, they are, if you look at, I think what's going to be important for us is to do some sort of study of this, because there is the Superfast project, which is sponsored through the County Council. It shows you where the Superfast project is going to deliver. And I've discovered, at least in Horton, that is going to be delivered through overland, from poles. In other words, there's going to be delivered from poles, whereas the fibre is actually up the poles already and is able to be distributed. And of course, those people who receive their telephony via poles, if you like, direct to their homes, are going to get fibre to the home. Those that are not, that actually have it underground, if it's not ducted, it can't be done. So there are going to be pockets all over our district where we may well consider development that won't be able to support the level of broadband either for personal or business. And I think that as far as this committee goes and this plan goes, we need to do a proper study on the current position on broadband availability and the performance that is promised by Openreach, and that for the future, and more particularly for those areas that we may earmark one way or another for further development, whether it be for retail, manufacturing, if there is any,
We're taking that.
or personal.
No, I think, George, this is enterprise.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Well,
Okay, can you just take it on board
I'll take it on board
and
and I'll report back to the group.
report back by Natalie
Natalie.
and give us some comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let's keep moving on.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
It was on my mind.
Yeah, no, that's fine, John.
I
But,
jogged it.
but
Thanks, John.
it's enterprise. Let's crack on with it. Right, moving on, Natalie. Now we're on to flooding, I think, aren't we?
Flooding 9.
Item 9.
So, in 2011, we published a strategic flood risk assessment for South Essex. There have been a number of updates to the Environment Agency's modelling since then. The most recent was to its climate change predictions. So, Rochford has again worked with its neighbours, Basildon, Castle Point and Southend, with the support of Essex County Council to deliver an update to that study. It's a level 1 assessment, which means it's fairly high level. It looks at potential breach locations and how far and how deep any flood water is likely to be should one of those breaches occur. The report sets out the main aims and methodology for undertaking the SFRA, sources of data, etc. that have been used, and then it sets out the main findings for Rochford District.
Not much more to say, really, is there?
Not at this point.
No. Neil.
Through Great Waverham Parish Council and its association with work that was done at Southend Borough Council to do with their shoreline assessments that they were doing. One of the things that was highlighted out of the conversations that we had with them was the involvement or not of Foulness and the MOD land there. Now, bearing in mind that that's a key part of the area, and which is an area which is potential risk for Rochford and risks of flooding from there. There was concerns about the amount of involvement or engagement of MOD and their contractors in relation to helping with the assessments that Southend were doing. So, in relation to this much broader scale, it's still a key and important area. How much engagement has there been with the MOD to do with Foulness?
So it was the shoreline management plan that you had discussions with. That's something slightly different to this plan. So we do have a shoreline management plan which covers Rochford District. I can't remember off the top of my head what date that is, but that's led by the Environment Agency generally, and it probably would have been Essex County Council. So that's something slightly different. That plan looks at broadly the condition of the flood defences in the area and what the Environment Agency's approach should be to maintaining or not those flood defences. So it is something slightly different to the plan that we've put before you, which is more of an evidence-based document which looks at, well, okay, what if this happens, where would it go, rather than the Environment Agency's plan on what they're actually going to do in terms of maintenance for the flood defences.
Just to jump over at that point, yes, the Environment Agency is obviously involved in very broad range, but
Yes.
But with regard to Foulness, the sea defences and flooding issues there
Yeah.
is not necessarily comes under the Environment Agency. I'm sure they're probably consulted about this, but the responsibility for maintenance and upkeep of that is MOD and their contractors.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I imagine that's the agreement that they have with the Environment Agency, that as the landowners that they would maintain the defence themselves. But
we don't necessarily get updates from them as to how any timetables or scale or whatever that they're doing is very much kept to themselves.
yeah, I imagine they liaise with the Environment Agency on a fairly regular basis, being the body that's responsible for that those type of works, but to my knowledge they haven't engaged with us in relation to the maintenance of flood defences.
That seems to be, things may be happening, but we're not necessarily party to, or information isn't provided to much. It's not filtered out very much.
I think for fairly obvious reasons. Anything else on this document as stated? No? Well, again, I think we endorse the recommendation. Again, Ian,
Just keep an update.
an update on the whole issue as we go
Sure.
through. If there's nothing to report, you say there's nothing to report. Okay. Moving on to item number 10. New local plan evidence base. Over to you, Natalie.
Okay, so this is the
Gypsy Travellers.
Gypsy Traveller accommodation assessment, similar to the retail and the economic development needs assessment studies. Members would have received a topic paper back in November highlighting the Rochester district elements of the emerging Essex-wide study on the needs for Gypsy Traveller communities. Again, the full report wasn't available at the time, so we used the elements of the study that had already emerged for Rochester District. So this report looks at and brings together all of the findings for all of the Essex authorities involved in the study, and it puts Rochester District within that wider context. Members may note that the update for Gypsy Travellers came about as a result of changes to the National Planning Policy Statement for traveller sites and the change in the definition of what can be considered as a traveller for planning policy purposes. So someone who is an ethnic Gypsy traveller but no longer travels for work, for example, is not considered a traveller for planning purposes. And as we prepare our individual plans, we need to consider how we meet the needs of all of the travelling community in the district, whether they do or don't meet the national definition that's in the planning policy statement for traveller sites. So the report before you at 3 sets out the wider context for the Essex assessment and what the main findings are. And it sets out there are a total of 82 households that meet the planning definition, 416 that are unknown, and 298 that definitely don't meet the definition. So there's a real mixture across the county within the wider context of the national planning statement. I won't go into all the details because there's lots of numbers involved in there. But we did ask for an update to the Rochester District element in January 18. This was dated following more recent appeals and decisions that had been made. So that was up to date as of January 18, 2018. I'm aware that time has moved on since then, but we are looking to keep that updated, particularly to inform the joint planning work that's ongoing.
Okay. Neil.
Yes, it's something that I was asked to sort of bring up. It may not necessarily have direct bearing on this specific report, but just bear in mind that we have a portfolio here. It would be something that maybe I might be able to give a view of. It was suggested that after a recent planning development committee meeting that in relation to planning applications, especially large ones that come forward, we have part of that process planning policy, council's policy in relation to affordable housing, and percentage of affordable housing forms a basis for those applications. In relation to how we council currently is with its current plan in relation to gypsy sites and stuff like that. We've got all our eggs in one basket, and with a site which is difficult to come forward, which causes us problems in relation to applications that come through about gypsy sites. And it was suggested and it seemed possible good idea, or just something to be to find out a little bit further information about this, as to whether it might be possible, in the same way as we deal with affordable housing and large applications, if possible that we could have allocation of sites for travellers on any future sort of large planning applications, and could the council make a policy in relation to that? I said I'll bring it forward and sort of like see what sort of what the view would be in relation to that, rather than having a specific sites. On that basis, you could have a developer develop the pitches for the council, and it would also scatter the pitches over a broader area rather than be on one site.
It's, how can I put it, there are lots of things that we have actually looked at in ideas with regard to that. I think one of the things that we felt initially was when we went up to the one that is maintained in Braintree, I think it is.
We went on in
Colchester, sorry,
Yeah.
in Colchester, which was the way that was managed. We saw that as an ideal solution, bearing in mind that the way it was run, it seemed as if it was an ideal solution, bearing in mind that they are travellers, that they need easy access to motorway routes and various things like that. But obviously they do need to have provision, educational provision, medical provision, those type of things that would be expected. So I think initially, where, and I take it you're referring to Michelin's Farm, which has been extremely difficult to bring forward, and has been a problem for us, especially bearing in mind the last time an inspector looked at it on an appeal and came down on a decision in making a site permanent, which went to appeal. It presents us with a difficulty which the council as a whole is going to have to recognise that we're going to have to do something to be able to accommodate, and I think we're all going to have to recognise that we're going to have to come up with solutions, albeit is there a way in which we can bring Michelin's Farm forward? If not, what do we do as an alternative?
Thanks, Ian. John.
Of course, there's two separate aspects to this review of evidence. There's the need for arguably 15 pitches, which are provided by a basis of local authorities, which you've just been talking about. I certainly don't think that developers are likely to agree to an allocation of pitches to individual sites that they're seeking commercial advantage from. Did I put that as carefully as I could? I hope so.
Very tactful. Very tactful, John.
I should become a politician. I don't know when. The thing that bothers me is we're now talking about transition provisions, and that kind of bothers me. I suppose on one side my head says, but they're doing it anyway, and they're simply bowling up to Clements Hall, Cherry Orchard Park, the place in Rayleigh, which is just opposite you.
John Fisher.
John Fisher. They're bowling up in all these places and just taking transition provisions. I know this report talks about the council engaging with others as to how this issue is dealt with, but I'm not sure at all that we should be earmarking transition provisions for travellers that are currently moving through our district on a commercial basis.
I think
Another way of subtly putting
the other issue, John, is of course the situation in Parliament, where there is a lengthy debate about how the travelling fraternity is perceived. and I'm trying to be
You talk
tactful.
about that carefully too. That's why I said travelling and
Yeah.
for commercial reasons. In
Yeah.
other words, they're working through an area doing the things that they do commercially. That's what I love about it.
But I think
See, I guess my response from this is to say, I think we need to do something about the pitches that are for permanency and do something about the temporary permissions that we've granted and ensure that we're able to deal with the transition of those. But in terms of transit, I'm not keen to provide in our plan for transition sites because I kind of feel that they won't be transition sites. They'll be in one way or another permanently utilised, and they could be considerably larger in our experience than 15 pitches. So I would say, Ian, if you're representing us at these consortium meetings, don't get please too excited or interested in providing transition sites. I would say I'd be more interested in seeing an appropriate law that prevents it from being necessary. That's a lovely way of putting it too, wasn't it?
Come on then.
So
That's
I don't know how this is going to be minuted, but I guess.
very scared.
But I guess
Yeah.
we're noting the
report.
we're noting the report, but have concerns
Yeah.
about both aspects. In particular, transit provision. Yes.
Can I just make a quick point of clarification on the report? So the report does look at providing permanent sites and looks at what we'd need to provide one permanently. It doesn't go so far as to address the transit issue. That's something that that's going to be considered separately across Essex. How that's dealt with is yet to be determined, but there's a lot more work that needs to go into working out what our baseline evidence is for that. The Essex County-wide Travellers Unit for Rochester District does deal with any, or assist us in dealing with any unauthorised encampments that may take place, and they have quite a lot of data from across the county. So as a group of authorities, we need to look at this in a bit more detail, work out what our actual baseline is, where those encampments may be taking place, and then once we've got that evidence, look at agreeing what we actually do with it.
Well, I guess I'm encouraging Ian to do very little. I hope that message has got. I hope it's what everyone else agrees with as well, because I really do fear these transit provisions.
It's not necessarily the case that it would be one transit site per authority.
No, there's three
area.
probably in our area.
It possibly across the county we're looking.
Yeah. Neil.
Yeah, I mean, the issue that came up sort of relatively recently was about an application where for a temporary sort of like allowing a temporary period related to a particular individual or family. And the question was, would that actually be enforceable over for that term, or was that going to end up being something that was going to become a permanent thing? Could it be expanded, become much bigger? And the issue is how do we take, potential for these type of sites coming up when we're looking at a plan for a much bigger period, and we could end up having a number of permissions provided.
I think on a lot of this, Neil, again, it's crystal balling, because we know that there is MPs who are very active in trying to bring some legislation into force that may influence some of these issues that we're expressing here. I think all we can do at the moment is accept the recommendation. I think planning and all these other issues,
Can we express our concern about transit provision?
express it, John. I mean,
No, I'm very willing to.
but I think at the end of the day, we accept the recommendation. I think we're all pretty much. It will be an issue for each individual planning application through development committee to decide what they feel at the time. And
I think it's a very difficult subject to discuss.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask the difference? I see in the actual report, page 22, they also refer to all emergency stopping places. What exactly are they? Are they defined?
I'm not sure whether they have been defined. That was an option. That's an option that's possibly going to be considered for transit.
It's not in the report though, is it?
No, it shouldn't. The transit issue
So are
is
we considering it as a district?
no. The transit issue is mentioned in both the Essex report and the individual local authority reports as well, but it doesn't go into any detail. It says we know what the situation is basically, we need to do more work on this, and leaves it at that. So there will be a separate piece of work that looks specifically at that, because we need to do that from a planning perspective. But the report that's in front of you at the moment doesn't actually make any firm recommendations on.
No, but I just wonder why it actually doesn't mention emergency stopping places, because it seems to be an option
Excuse me,
for
Chairman.
transit
Yeah,
sites
sorry, Chairman.
or emergency stopping places, and should we not actually give up the possibility of an emergency stopping place in this district in our report? Is my
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, what you're saying.
Because what does an emergency stopping place
Okay.
mean?
who would decide what's an emergency to stop?
Exactly. What's
Yeah.
Well, that's my next question. What's the criteria for
Did
emergency?
they run out of fuel?
I don't think that's been specifically defined. It probably would be included in a report on transit
So should we
provision.
not even just say, as we mention specific sites and transit provision, should we not just mention that there is this possibility that we
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would suggest,
to make that
if the
amendment, yeah.
police decided this is an emergency scenario, we want them put in here, they would have the
John Fisher.
and that's what they've done in other places. While I've been the portfolio holder, they deliberately put them in one area because they know where they are,
Exactly. They did it because the residents were making.
and they can control the situation. And John Fisher, there was about 5 or 6 turned up, and then as more turned up, they were all ushered into the same area because then they know. But
Well,
I
like
think
say,
we're moving on to another
In
area.
local plan terms, I'm sure that residents will be concerned about
Yes.
the potential for transition and emergency stopping places.
Your comments are noted, John.
Okay.
Thank you. We will close the meeting at 11:12. Thank you very much. We will, with Sonia, try and organise some meetings, regular meetings, on a monthly basis. Even if there's nothing, to report, then we send something out to members to say, you know, it's going to be a 10-minute meeting, or there's nothing, or whatever. But I think we need to allocate on a monthly basis a meeting.
Yeah, I agree, and you know, if there is a briefing note that goes with it to support that,
Yeah.
all the better. Because then we can demonstrate to everyone that we've considered the issues.
Yeah. Or what we can consider.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Just going to take my wife to hospital.
Hopefully it's going to
Yeah, I hope so.
How many times
Yes.
can they do it?
I think it's just a one-off. I think.
Oh, one flip, if it takes.
Yeah. But I don't know what happens if it doesn't work. That is the problem.
And then it was celebrated at school because everyone said, oh, they could tell me coming.
You can have a chat with
Drop to your email from last night. I will be coming on Thursday.
You are going to, so I'll take your apologies off. I know, I kept
No
telling
problem. It's
the,
21 now.
Is it? It was 16 when I got in. It is coloured, isn't it? Yeah, come on. We might as well do it here. Yeah, I'm kind
I've
of.
got a
If
full
that's
set
okay
next
with
door. I
you.
wasn't going to lumber it in, so do you want to take that?
Something Southend.
Oh, are you?
I was going to
Oh, okay. No, if you want to go.
because I've got some next door.
I've got to shoot 10 more white hospital now, but if you just leave
Leave
the
it in the pigeonhole,
yeah,
yeah.
that'd be fine.
What did you want to talk about first of all? Because you said before the meeting.